The court erupted, ministers were shouting. One of them pointed a finger directly at the old astronomer and called him a fraud, right there in the imperial palace. Because a bronze ball had fallen out of a dragon's mouth. That's it. A small bronze ball rolling from the jaws of a metal dragon into the open mouth of a bronze toad below it. The device sitting in the corner of the hall, this strange, beautiful 6-foot bronze vessel covered in dragons, had just indicated that a massive earthquake had struck somewhere to the northwest. But nobody in the capital had felt a thing. No tremor, no shaking, nothing. The ground beneath their feet was perfectly still. And so the court did what courts have always done when someone makes a claim they can't immediately verify. They laughed, they mocked, they said the machine was a joke and the man who built it was a fool. That man was Zhang Heng, and he was about to be proven spectacularly right. But to understand how we got to this moment, a lone scientist standing against an entire imperial bureaucracy with nothing but a bronze dragon on his side, we need to go back. Way back. Zhang Heng was born in the year 78 AD in Nanyang, a city in what is now Henan province, during the Eastern Han dynasty. And from an early age, he was one of those people who was just annoyingly good at everything. He wrote poetry that got him compared to the great literary masters. He painted. He studied the classics. By his 20s, he had a reputation as one of the finest writers in the empire. But Zhang Heng wasn't satisfied with literature. He turned to mathematics, then astronomy, then engineering. He built a rotating celestial globe powered by water that could map the movements of stars and planets across the sky. He calculated pi to a degree of accuracy that wouldn't be matched in China for centuries. He proposed, in the 2nd century, that the moon did not produce its own light, but reflected the light of the sun. He described lunar eclipses with a mechanical explanation at a time when most of the world still blamed them on angry gods. This was a man operating on a completely different level from almost anyone else alive on the planet at that time. And the Han court knew it. Emperor An brought him to the capital, Luoyang, and appointed him chief astronomer. His job was to observe the heavens, track celestial events, maintain the calendar, and advise the emperor on matters of cosmic significance. Because in Han Dynasty China, earthquakes weren't just natural disasters, they were political events. The emperor ruled under something called the mandate of heaven, the idea that the cosmos itself had chosen him to lead. When the ground shook, it was interpreted as a sign that heaven was displeased. Maybe the emperor was unjust. Maybe his officials were corrupt. Earthquakes could, and did, topple political careers, shift court alliances, and in extreme cases, delegitimize entire dynasties. So knowing when and where an earthquake struck wasn't just a matter of scientific curiosity. It was a matter of power. Sometime around the year 132 AD, Zhang Heng unveiled his creation. The Chinese histories call it the Hofeng Didongyi, which roughly translates to instrument for measuring the seasonal winds and the movements of the earth. We would call it a seismoscope, a device for detecting earthquakes. And it was breathtaking. Picture a large bronze vessel, about 6 feet in diameter, shaped like a wine jar. Around its outer surface, 8 dragon heads faced outward in 8 directions: north, south, east, west, and the 4 points in between. Each dragon held a small bronze ball delicately balanced in its jaws. Below each dragon sat a bronze toad with its mouth wide open, positioned to catch the ball if it fell. The idea was mechanically elegant. When seismic waves from a distant earthquake reached the device, an internal mechanism, and this is where it gets fascinating because we don't know exactly what it looked like, would be triggered. A pendulum, most likely, hanging inside the vessel. The earthquake's vibrations would cause the pendulum to swing in the direction of the quake, which would trigger a lever connected to one specific dragon head. That dragon's jaws would open. The ball would drop. It would land in the toad's mouth with a clang, and you would know not just that an earthquake had happened, but which direction it came from. No one had ever built anything like this, anywhere. In the entire world, the Roman Empire at this same moment in history was near the height of its power under Hadrian. The Romans were extraordinary engineers: aqueducts, roads, concrete. But they had nothing even remotely close to an earthquake detection device. Nobody did. Zhang Heng was 17 centuries ahead of the curve. Now we return to that moment in the imperial court. One day, the device activated. The dragon facing northwest opened its mouth. The bronze ball dropped and rang out against the toad below. But in Luoyang, the capital, no one had felt any tremor, not the slightest vibration. The court officials were skeptical, to put it mildly. Some of them had opposed Zhang Heng for years. He had made political enemies, as brilliant people in bureaucracies tend to do. They saw this as their moment. The device was clearly broken. Zhang Heng was a charlatan. His precious dragon jar was an expensive piece of decorative nonsense. For several days, this was the dominant opinion at court. Zhang Heng stood by his invention, but he was increasingly isolated. And then a rider arrived, a messenger, exhausted and dust-covered, from the northwest. From Longxi, in what is now Gansu province, roughly 400 miles away. There had been a massive earthquake. The destruction was severe, and Zhang Heng's device had detected it. The ball had fallen in precisely the correct direction. The court fell silent. The historical text, the Book of the Later Han, compiled by Fan Ye in the 5th century, records that from that day forward, even Zhang Heng's critics had to acknowledge the device worked. The court officially accepted the seismoscope, and the emperor ordered that future earthquakes be monitored using the instrument. For a brief, shining moment, science had won. But here is where the story takes a turn that is, honestly, kind of heartbreaking. Zhang Heng died in 139 AD, just 7 years after his seismoscope's triumphant validation. And while his invention was recorded in the official histories, the actual device did not survive. No blueprints, no detailed internal diagrams. The description in the Book of the Later Han gives us the external appearance and the general principle, but the exact internal mechanism, whatever system of pendulums and levers made the whole thing work, was never fully documented, at least not in any text that survived the centuries. China itself continued to experience earthquakes, of course. The country sits on several major fault lines, and Chinese scholars continued to reference Zhang Heng's work. But the specific technology, the reproducible engineering, that faded. It became legend more than science. It became a story people told rather than a machine people built. Meanwhile, in Europe, the study of earthquakes barely existed as a discipline for over 1,000 years after Zhang Heng's death. The first European seismoscope wasn't built until 1703, when a French scientist named Jean de la Hautefeuille proposed a mercury-based device for detecting tremors. The first truly functional European seismograph, a device that not only detects but records earthquake data, didn't appear until 1783 in Italy. That's 1,651 years after Zhang Heng dropped a bronze ball into a toad's mouth in Luoyang. 17 centuries. So why did Europe take so long? Part of the answer is simply that East and West weren't talking to each other, not in any systematic way. The Silk Road carried goods and some ideas, but detailed technical knowledge about Chinese scientific instruments didn't travel well across 8,000 miles of desert and mountain and political fragmentation. Part of the answer is cultural. In medieval Europe, earthquakes were acts of God. Divine punishment, apocalyptic warnings. The idea that you could build a machine to detect them, that you could treat them as natural phenomena to be measured and studied, was borderline heretical for much of European history. And part of the answer is simply the arrogance that comes with assuming you're the center of the world. European scholars, even well into the Enlightenment, routinely dismissed or ignored technological achievements from China, India, the Islamic world, and elsewhere. It wasn't that the information was entirely unavailable. Jesuit missionaries in China during the 17th and 18th centuries sent back detailed reports on Chinese science and technology. Some European intellectuals paid attention, many did not. The assumption was that real science, serious science, was a European project. Everything else was folklore. It took the modern era and a genuine reckoning with the global history of science for Zhang Heng to receive anything close to the recognition he deserved. Today, there's a crater on the moon named after him. An asteroid bears his name. The Chinese government has issued stamps in his honor. In 2018, China launched a satellite dedicated to earthquake monitoring and named it Zhang Heng 1. There's something in this story that goes beyond earthquakes and bronze dragons. It's about what we choose to remember and what we allow ourselves to forget. Zhang Heng solved a problem in the 2nd century that the rest of the world wouldn't even properly frame for another millennium and a half. And yet, for most of recorded Western history, his name appeared nowhere in the textbooks. Not because his work didn't matter, but because the people writing those textbooks weren't looking in his direction. It makes you wonder how many other Zhang Hengs are out there, buried in histories we never translated, in traditions we never took seriously, in cultures we dismissed before we bothered to understand them. The past is so much bigger than any one civilization's memory of it. If that's the kind of story that makes you want to dig deeper, stick around. There are more of them on this channel, and there will be more coming. Every week, actually. So if you want to catch the next one, you know what button to hit.